Good evening, everyone. I'm Jeff Peterson. I'm the president of the Village Preservation and Improvement Society. I want to welcome you to this forum for candidates for school board for the City of Falls Church. I want to thank the candidates for agreeing to participate in this forum and for providing written responses to questions. Background information on the candidates for both City Council and the school board, as well as responses to written questions, can be found on the booklet posted on the VPIS website. That's www.vpis.org. I also want to thank our great partners, the League of Women Voters of Falls Church, for joining us in sponsoring this forum. The recording from tonight's forum will be posted on the VPIS website in the next couple of days. And with that, I want to turn it over to the League of Women Voters.
I'm Allison Brown, president of League of Women Voters Falls Church. Welcome. We're looking forward to hearing from all the school board candidates this evening. And we encourage everybody to vote. Early voting is already open. You can go to City Hall Monday through Friday during the weekdays from 8 to 5. Early voting is open at the registrar's office in City Hall. And then it'll be open 2 Saturdays before the election. So that's October 23rd and October 30th. And that'll be from 9 to 5. And then of course, election day is Tuesday, November 2nd. And check out, we have a print voter's guide in today's edition of the News Press. And it's also available online at vote411.org. So now I'm going to turn it over to our moderators, who are Keith Thurston from VPIS and Annie Rhodes-Klein from League of Women Voters. And we will start with the forum. Thank you.
But you'll notice that each time the person that begins the question first will change throughout the period to be fair with all candidates. So the first question has been provided to the candidates so they'll be equally prepared for 2 minutes. Will you please introduce yourself, describe your background, and why it makes you well suited for being on the Falls Church School Board. Please include whether or not you've served on any local boards, commissions, school committees, and what your priorities would be. 2 minutes, please. And we'll start with candidate Anderson.
Hello, I'm Jared Anderson. I've lived in Falls Church City for 5 years with my 2 sons, Huxley and Orek, both one at JTP and one at Mount Daniel, and my wife Meredith, who also serves on the city's Housing Commission. I'm a health statistician and currently work on a large national health survey. I have also worked in the fields of public education and rural economic development. In these roles, I have been able to leverage data to ensure student success, teacher satisfaction, and efficient use of government resources. Additionally, in all these roles, I have collaborated with many stakeholder groups to ensure multiple perspectives are taken into account when coming to a decision. For example, while implementing educational technology in the public schools in Memphis, Tennessee, I worked with teachers and administrators to ensure the right students were being prioritized and teachers were not overburdened by excessive mandates. I would bring my expertise in data and my experience in collaborative problem solving across multiple fields to the school board. I want FCCPS to be a caring community where all students thrive, all staff feel supported, and all parents can engage as partners in their child's education. I want to ensure that the board is gathering systematic feedback from the community so that we can continue progressing towards those goals. By systematically seeking feedback from staff, students, parents, and the wider community, the administration and the board can better understand the issues of, for example, potential burnout among students and staff, whether the materials students have access to reflect a diverse set of backgrounds, what, if anything, needs to be changed in order to address mental health stress, or how to creatively use any surplus funds to serve our students. I want the schools to continue providing an excellent and caring environment for students and staff. And I look forward to working with the 6 other board members and the school administration in partnership with the entire school community in that pursuit. Thank you.
Thank you. Next on to candidate Gould.
All right, thanks for having me. And League of Women Voters and VPIS, we appreciate you hosting this event. and I look forward to having this discussion with our the other 6 candidates tonight. So in my answers and what I'm going to be talking about tonight, I hope you all are able to take away 2 themes of what I bring as a possible school board member. The first is my education experience. I hope that you're able to hear in the examples and what I go through all of the experiences I have in education, policy, research, statistics, and you'll hear that this is all I've ever done in my career. This is all I ever will do. I really enjoyed working with school districts and states across the country in education, but I want to help Falls Church City, and this is a place that my family and my 2 kids, my wife, we have enjoyed. It's welcomed us from the first day. And we look forward to having this be our home for a long time. So that's one thing I hope you hear from me tonight and you take away. The other aspect that I would like for you to take away is my confidence as a leader, as a leader that listens and has a significant experience in leading organizations, leading people, leading initiatives. I have a track record of working with initiatives on all political sides, with governors and state superintendents across the aisle on education policy. So I hope that you are able to take that away from my education experience on the civic service side. But I'm also a CEO. I have started organizations, and I have significant experience in the education sector on the private side. So hopefully you'll see that in my answers and my anecdotes. And I definitely look forward to bringing both my public and my private experience in education as a school board member. So I'm looking forward to tonight. And as you'll see, I'm really excited about all the topics we're going to talk about. This is all I do. So I'm looking forward to the discussion. So thank you. Oh, I love that. That's gonna be fun.
Thank you. Next on to candidate Mooney.
Good evening. It's a pleasure to be here this evening. As you heard, my name is Courtney Mooney. I was born and raised in Asheville, North Carolina. My father is a pediatric dentist. My mother was a high school English teacher. I went on to the University of North Carolina, where I was actually a member of the UNC women's basketball team. And as part of that experience, I was a captain of our team. I was a member of the Student Athlete Council, which worked directly with our athletic department on athletic department initiatives, as well as community outreach initiatives around UNC Chapel Hill sports and community relations. I was also a speaker for the Educational Foundation while I was a student there. So all of those experiences really got me off on the right foot to embrace leadership, challenging myself, striving for excellence. I've leveraged that into a career in medical sales and in the medical field. I've actually been in diagnostic testing for the past 12 years. And diagnostic testing is one of those things that actually makes me quite well suited to deal with a myriad of things that may come up day to day. One, diagnostics drives decision making. And so you have to be an effective communicator with providers. I work with all types of specialties, with all different types of community situations. So you have a wide variety of interest groups who all have different focuses and priorities, and they're all trying to serve a community, their patients. And what I do is a very integral part of that. It's part crisis management, prioritization, looking at workflows, being able to provide education and communication around not just their business, but certain aspects of testing, understanding guidance and policy, and how to give that to physicians in a manner that is easily digestible and something that they can actually take and apply into their day-to-day. And the past year, I work a lot with children as a coach. So I think I bring a lot to the table from the school board, and I'm really excited to have this opportunity.
Keith, we can't hear you.
Thank you very much. Next on to candidate Ortiz.
Thank you, Keith. Thank you, Jeff and Allison, the League of Women Voters, and the Village Preservation and Improvement Society. I really appreciate the opportunity to be here. We moved here in 2013 because of the reputation for the schools, and our children have thrived. My daughter is now in 7th grade and is a fierce individual, and my son is in the 10th grade and is doing terrific. And I want to be on the school board to apply the experience that I have to serve the schools that have served us. While I have a PhD in electrical engineering, I've dedicated my career to public policy, and I've over 20 years of experience in the key functions of the school board. Those are strategic planning, budgeting, policymaking, and excuse me, strategic planning, policymaking, and oversight. And currently I lead a team of over 90 staff in executing those functions to protect our electrical system. The schools and the whole community have suffered for a year through the pandemic, and the schools, as a center part of our community, is going to have to lead our emergence from the pandemic. And the pandemic itself has amplified two challenges that we've already had. Those are mental health and equity, or disequity, I should say. With respect to mental health, the isolation of the pandemic stressed us all, and younger students weren't able to develop the emotional and social skills that they need. With respect to equity, while I was able to work at home and was lucky enough to help my children during the day, many of our families weren't. And the challenges that the pandemic brought on only further stressed the inequities that we have in our society. To solve this, I look forward to working with my colleagues in the school board, the community, and especially teachers. Teachers are what we see out of the schools, and the teachers are the ones who are a primary source of innovation for what we can do to move forward. Thank you very much. I look forward to the discussion.
Thank you. We move on now to candidate Shapiro.
Thanks very much. Good evening, and thanks to the League of Women Voters and the Village Preservation and Improvement Society. This is my first time running for office. As I filled out my paperwork in June, I thought of nothing but my two sons. My oldest is in kindergarten at Mount Daniel. My youngest is at Doolin Cooperative Preschool, where my wife, Kristen, is the president, and where I've helped out in various ways, including as perhaps the first ever Jewish Santa Claus. We moved to Falls Church 7 years ago for the same reason most of you did, to give our kids, at that point, the ones we hope to have, the best educational opportunities. I dearly want that for all children in our little city. I learned the importance of education from my parents. They made tremendous sacrifices to get me out of the Soviet Union. We immigrated to Canada, where I had a typical small town childhood full of sports and Boy Scouts, working hard and dreaming big. I came to the US for college and law school, becoming a citizen in 2014. I'm one of the few people you'll meet who's naturalized twice. And like most immigrants, I do a job that most native-born Americans won't, defending the Constitution. Indeed, as a constitutional lawyer at a nonpartisan think tank, I have unique experience understanding how legal policy can make a significant impact on people's lives. My professional background, including filing Supreme Court briefs and testifying before congressional and state committees, has made me familiar with complex questions of education law, which will help Falls Church navigate state and federal regulations. I'm also a member of the Virginia Advisory Committee to the U.S. Commission on Civil Rights, serve on several nonprofit boards, and perhaps most importantly, help coach my son's T-ball team here in Falls Church Little League. Local engagement is where we start to build the society we want. In my day job, I know what it is to be a fair arbiter among competing interests, to earn the praise and ire of both political parties. That's the sort of thing we need to confront the challenges ahead. If elected, I'd represent and engage all constituents, and that includes non-parents. I'm running to ensure that the little city maintains excellent schools while providing accountability, responsiveness, transparency, and diversity of thought. If you agree with those priorities, I'd love your vote. Thanks very much.
Thank you. Next is candidate Silverman.
Thank you very much for having me tonight, VPIS and League of Women Voters. I'm Lori Silverman, and I'm a small business owner. I'm a non-practicing lawyer. I'm an advocate for candidates and causes I believe in. I'm the daughter of a public school elementary teacher. I'm a proud Falls Church City resident and have been since 2016. But most importantly and proudly, I'm the mom to Isabella and Ryan. Communication, collaboration, and community. Those three pillars are what I really focus on during my campaign in order to maintain our exceptional schools. Creating a culture of caring for our students, teachers, and staff is necessary in order to remain on the same track. We moved here for the schools when my daughter started at Jesse Thackeray. Volunteering is important to me. Before the pandemic, I was a frequent volunteer in the schools, whether it was recess duty, chaperoning field trips, or helping the teachers with holiday parties. Since the reopening of the schools, that involvement is obviously much more limited. However, I still find opportunities to volunteer outdoors at the schools. During March and April of 2020, I volunteered by driving meals to the elderly, and I've also offered pro bono services at my work to some candidates and causes that I truly believe in. I will be a thoughtful and reasonable voice in these uncertain times as we navigate ahead together. I want to ensure our schools remain open full-time to our families and teachers, but in a safe and responsible way with as few disruptions as possible. I will ensure our children feel secure and receive the necessary additional resources they may need to continue their personal growth to become the best versions of themselves. The children need this extra support, but our teachers do too. I want the teachers, staff, parents, and community to have an authentic voice, feel truly heard, and hope that everybody receives the respect they deserve. We have excellent schools, and I will work hard through communication, collaboration, and community to keep them that way. Again, thank you so much for having me tonight, and I look forward to our discussion.
Thank you. And our seventh candidate is candidate Tice.
Great. Good evening. Here I am at number 7. I also want to thank the League and VBIS for hosting us tonight. I know these events take a lot of volunteer time and effort and are an important service to our community, so thank you. I also want to thank our viewers because there's just so much demanding our attention these days, and I'm consistently impressed and inspired by how engaged our community is. It's awesome. Now, for those who don't know me, I'm Kathleen Tice. I'm a former teacher with a master's degree in elementary education. I have 4 kids who currently attend 3 Falls Church City schools, and my passions have always been in education, literacy, and social justice. When I decided to stay home with my kids, I found many ways to continue to pursue those passions. Regularly volunteering in the classroom of our cooperative preschool and serving on the board and eventually as president of that preschool, serving on the Mary Riley Stiles Board of Trustees, and eventually co-creating a development committee for the library's foundation, volunteering with Moms Demand Action to prevent gun violence, and eventually serving as a voice on the gun legislation working group in advisory to our city council. And when each of my 4 kids reached elementary school, I always served as a room parent and eventually on the GT advisory committee and as the elementary PTA president. It's important to me to serve a community well and understand its needs before leading it. Serving on our school board just feels like the next right step for my service to our community. I believe our schools are indeed excellent. I support our hardworking leadership, and I celebrate our extremely dedicated teachers and staff. However, having been deeply involved in our school community for going on 9 years now, I have a clear understanding of what needs to change or how we can be even better. So I would like to be a strong and positive voice on our school board, to recognize and leverage our community's many strengths in order to serve our students and families better. I believe we can do that equitably, in partnership with our professional teachers and staff, and with open communication, so that when we don't all agree, at least we understand each other. Thank you.
Thank you to all of our candidates. Before we move on to our audience, I'd like to let you know that our program is in 2 major pieces. We have pre-planned questions for the first hour for the candidates, and then the last 30 minutes, we have questions from you. You'll notice at the bottom of your screen, there's a Q&A button. You can click on that and add your question in there. And when we get to the end, if that question has not already been addressed, we'll try to work the high priority ones, the ones that are asked most frequently, in at that time. Thank you. So now over to the League for question number 2.
Thank you, Keith. As Keith said earlier, we're rotating the order. So for this question, we're going to start with candidate Gould. And for this question and most of the rest of the questions for the evening, they're going to be 1 minute, 1 minute to answer. So the question is, what do you see as the key purposes of public schools? And how should the school board, the superintendent, and the school administrations work to achieve this purpose? We'll start with candidate Gould.
Okay. One of the primary responsibilities of the public education setup in our country is around educating our students to be active civic engagement. That is a principle that is embedded from the founding of our public schools over 100 years ago. And that concept of civic engagement, understanding our role as citizens at a young age, is something that cannot be done in isolation. It does require the concept of a school board and teachers and staff and coaches and principals coming together. And really that's the role of the school board, is to pull that together, to be able to have that locally controlled understanding of how we come together as a community to raise our schools. And that's why in our country, there is a strong local control for all of our public education. So as a school board, that's our responsibility to provide that accountability, to provide that leadership, to provide that guidance, to provide that translation and connection with all of our citizens. Thanks.
Thank you. We're going to now move to candidate Mooney.
Thank you. So, and somewhat what Tate was saying, I believe that the purpose of our schools is to provide education and preparation for our community's children for their next steps in life and help them explore where they want to go, who they want to be, but also ensuring critical thinking and literacy around that and the ability to go out into the world and function as adults in society. But the purpose of the school board for the superintendent, it's to ensure the day-to-day operations of that message is happening on a day-to-day basis. And from a school board, I think it's our intrinsic and important responsibility to ensure that the goals and the measurements are staying to serve the community, are staying aligned and staying on track with the school. So we have to be a facilitator and communicators between the parents and the school system in order to ensure that our children's needs and goals and the overall arching policies and guidance are being met.
Thank you. We are now going to turn to candidate Ortiz.
Thanks so much for the question. The purpose of public schools is to create productive and engaged citizens. And in Falls Church, we've committed to creating global citizens through our International Baccalaureate program. And that's been a commitment from the community and one that the school board takes seriously in its oversight of the administration of the schools. With respect to working with the superintendent to make sure that happens, making sure that there's a clear vision for the schools is essential. And one of the first tasks of this newly seated school board will be to renew that vision in collaboration with the community, and then to ensure that the goals and milestones are set effectively and measured accurately so that over time, we can make sure that we're making progress to achieving those goals.
Thank you. Next, we'll turn to candidate Shapiro.
Well, there's only so many ways to say that the purpose of public schools is to educate our kids, to make them into critical thinkers, eventually productive members of society, make them well-adjusted members of society, to provide them opportunities to thrive and to ultimately achieve their goals, achieve the great opportunities that this country, this state, this region, and this little city provides. So the board sets policy and governs. It oversees, it's the boss of the superintendent, who along with his staff manages and operates that policy, runs the schools, and the teachers teach. And I've been blessed when I was younger to have very good public school teachers, and I'm a big supporter of them and want them to have a big voice along with the parents, along with all the stakeholders in our community, because only by working together can we continue here in the district that is known for its excellent schools to maintain and preserve that while enhancing accountability and responsiveness.
Thank you. Next, we'll turn to candidate Silverman.
I grew up in the public school system from kindergarten all the way through college. Again, I'm the daughter of a public school retiree, a proud NEA member, and public schools have always been something important in my life and in my family's life. Every child in our country deserves that right and access to public education, no matter of their economic status, no matter of their racial background, no matter of their immigration status. Every child in our country deserves the right to public education. And I strongly believe also that we have great people in our Falls Church City, from the superintendent all the way down to the teachers and staff in the community, who can work together and communicate and collaborate in order to make our school systems the best they can be. I'm proud to be here and couldn't imagine being in any other school district. Thank you.
Thank you. Now we'll turn to candidate Tice.
Thank you. I've been a part of many different kinds of schools in my life. I was public school educated and taught in urban public schools, and I taught for a year in a private school and tutored in private schools, and went to college in a public school and graduate school in a public school. I've seen a lot of different kinds of education, and I'm a strong believer in public education as the purpose to educate all of our students and to kind of level the playing field and make sure that they all have equal access to the opportunity of an education and to be able to fully reach their potential. And the school board advises the superintendent in an advisory role as a sounding board and guardrails and sort of a checks and balances system to make sure that that group of 7 board members, 7 diverse people, hopefully from a diverse group of the community, to make sure that the students can go out in the world and be thriving members of their community and reach their potential.
Thank you. Now we will turn to candidate Anderson.
Yes, I think the purpose of any education is to ensure that children can grow up to be adults who flourish, who live a full life, and who can engage with others in respect and achieve their excellence as they see fit. The role of public education is to ensure that that opportunity is there for all. So no matter who you are and what background you are, it's there for you. The purpose of the school board is to set the priorities and the goals and measurable goals for the schools to achieve, so that they can properly educate the students. And the goal and the role of the superintendent is to carry out those goals. And the school board is there to ensure, in partnership with him or her, that they are achieving a great education that leads to flourishing for all students. Thank you.
Thank you very much. I will now turn back to VPIS for the next question.
Question number 3, and we'll start off with candidate Mooney. If elected, how would you ensure that decision-making that promotes equity and minimizes unconscious bias and ensures that our schools best serve all students?
Great question. Well, I think that the heart of all of this is honest and transparent conversation. Because if we can't sit down and discuss these things openly and have debate and dig into how we can best address these things, then, how do we even start? So I think, first of all, encouraging an open space where people can communicate their thoughts is the absolute step 1 to this. Open, transparent communication is absolutely where we have to start. And then we have to make sure that our community is on board. And then I think Jared touched on this, making sure that we have measurable goals. It's great to put policy and to talk about these things, but if we don't put things behind it that are measurable, that are actual, that we can look from one year to the next to see if the things that we're discussing and the goals and the policies that we're putting in place are effective, then it's really a lot of noise and a waste of time. So that's how I would start to set the baseline of that conversation.
Thank you. We're on to candidate Ortiz.
Thank you for the question. Let me address this in 2 ways. One is by starting with the teachers, administrators, and community, and the second by addressing it with respect to students. With respect to the community, there is a well documented as well as mature training as well as conversation setting that can happen that we can put in place to ensure appropriate identification and addressing of unconscious bias and ensuring equity in the policies as we implement them. With respect to students, I applaud the district's use of our various histories, as well as telling multiple sides and multiple stories, allowing all students to understand that their vision and view of the world is but one, and by embracing others, you have a richer experience. And that way we can ensure that the students that we're developing are ones who understand biases and are able to filter them out and to be productive with everyone.
Thank you. Candidate Shapiro.
Thanks. This is an important question. I'm actually concerned that board governance has sometimes focused too much in this area on cosmetics or other secondary matters and not enough on substance. For example, following state law, our board adopted a diversity, equity, and inclusion policy this spring, which includes a commitment to promote anti-racism. But what does that mean for both students and teachers who will be evaluated on that standard? Nobody in good faith can disagree with making our schools open, welcoming, and accessible to all, but the school board missed an opportunity to set positive expectations, especially in light of heated controversies in other districts. I want to make sure we're not airbrushing Virginia's and America's troubling history on race, talk about Juneteenth or the centenary of the Tulsa Massacre, but also not using guilt or shame or oppressor and oppressed classes and political advocacy as teaching tools. I'll encourage my colleagues to focus on how well our schools are serving our students. And as probably the only person here who started as an ESL learner, I understand the challenges that some of our communities face.
Thank you very much. Candidate Silverman.
I'm really proud of our city for passing such a strong policy on diversity, inclusion, and equity and putting it down on paper. Now that we have this policy, it's really time to start funding the policy and actually putting the money in the classrooms. What that exactly looks like, I don't know, because I'm not a teacher and I leave the teaching to the experts in that area, our best asset, the teachers. I would look to them for their creativity, for their input on how we should start implementing these policies, how we should start implementing the diversity curriculum into the classrooms, how we should start looking at equity in different ways amongst our student body, amongst our staff and our teachers. I want to make sure that all of our children have a comfortable classroom and have access to the correct histories in our textbooks and can really thrive in our city based on this great policy that can now start to be implemented. Thank you.
Thank you. Candidate Tice.
I want to serve all of our students and families equitably. And I know equity is a buzzword right now, but it's just the quality of being fair. And as I taught my students and now my own children, fair does not always mean equal. But what's fair is every student having the same access to opportunity, each child feeling seen and valued as an individual, and making sure we're fairly representing the full spectrum of human experience in our curriculum and across our school community. I want to make sure all of our students in general and within specific populations, such as ESOL and special ed, our students from lower income families, that they feel fully valued and are able to achieve their academic goals. I support our diversity, equity, and inclusion policy and the important first steps we've taken in this effort. However, I want our schools to be a leader in equity across the region. And to do that, we need to keep taking action. I support the recommendations from our infrastructure assessment of diversity to increase the recruitment and retention of diverse teachers and staff and implement a curriculum audit. I'd also like our community to dig deeper and just see how we can open our doors wider. Thank you.
Thank you. Candidate Anderson.
We only become aware of the unconscious bias that we have when we actually engage in conversation with others who are different from us. Asking students and parents and teachers where they think that we might be engaging in bias is important. So knowing how the ESOL families are receiving services is super important. We should be asking them. Do we know where the unconscious bias is actually manifesting itself? Is it manifesting in test scores? If so, then we need a measurable goal and saying, hey, we need to reduce the gaps by this amount over this time, and then reevaluate, see whether we've been effective. And I think just addressing bias in that way, in measurable ways and in conversation, that's how we can kind of be a better city.
Thank you. Candidate Gould.
Yeah, I strongly believe that we need to know about our history, that we need to keep civic engagement. We need to keep that community connection with what we are exposing our kids to, teaching our kids, letting them understand and go through that. Our history in our country is not fixed. And I think sometimes we do assume it is. We are still uncovering the depths of what our country has systemically mistreated groups of marginalized identity. And we need to keep exploring that. I mean, I was a high school math teacher, and I remember teaching one theorem, and 3 years later, we were taught that it was no longer true, and that was math. And so I think we should be open to the fact that history changes, and we should be ready for having that exploration and allowing that exploration to be moved into our curriculum and our discussions. So I feel like our community is inclusive, our community understands this, and most of all, we trust the teachers and we trust the students to have this debate, to have this discussion, to have this opportunity to explore what equity means and understand what education means in terms of our history. So.
Thank you. Now to question 4.
All right, thank you, Keith. We are up to question 4. And this question, we're going to start with candidate Ortiz. The question is, if elected, how would you recommend dealing with the COVID issues? Keeping safe teachers, staff, students, and families while advancing education. What would you recommend keeping, changing, either adding or subtracting to the COVID mitigation measures the schools currently have in place? And that's 1 minute.
Thanks for the question. I appreciate that. Coming to this school year, after having a year of experience with COVID and understanding the importance of in-school learning, the Falls Church City Public Schools put in place a series of mitigation measures, which in all my written statements I've supported. In addition, the superintendent and his staff and team working with the school board have taken further steps, including to roll out a testing program in partnership with the state health organizations. And I believe that kind of diagnostic testing, as well as in real time, can help us to make decisions to keep students in school. Additionally, if a vaccine is approved for all students, I would support a mandate for vaccines for all students and staff.
Thank you. We are now going to move to candidate Shapiro.
Thanks. I'm gratified that Falls Church, our district, was a regional leader in COVID response. We were more flexible. We didn't have the learning loss in some of our neighbors faced. We reopened schools sooner than our neighbors. I strongly support in-person school and oppose virtual or hybrid school environments except in extraordinary circumstances. So we should use the federal COVID funds that we're getting. Apparently, we're awash in them to address COVID issues, including a transparent analysis and plan to address learning loss. But still, we've been behind best practices nationwide. And in fact, compared to the parochial and private schools locally, I don't think the virus affects you differently if you pray the rosary than if you don't. And yet our Catholic schools were open all of last school year. So I want to follow the science. And I want to make sure to have the best educational in-person opportunities for everyone. Perhaps this new testing program that we're all going to be a part of on a voluntary basis is going to help with that. But I do want to make sure that our kids are back to normal as soon as possible.
Thank you. We will now turn to candidate Silverman.
Thank you. I give tremendous credit to our superintendent, administration, teachers, and the community, and everybody else involved for opening the schools last fall when the rest of the region wasn't able to reopen at that time. That took a lot of planning, it took a lot of risk, and it just took a lot of courage holding hands together and getting that done. And again, if it hadn't been for our teachers getting vaccinated on school property and back up and running as quickly as possible, I don't think that could have happened. In terms of what we're doing today, I 100% support Dr. Noonan's mitigation efforts, whether mask wearing is mandated by the state or not, because we might have a governor in a few months who does not support mask mandating. I will support mask mandating for indoors if that's what the CDC and the AAP recommend. I'm not a scientist. I'm just a mom trying to do what's best, and an AAP for guidance. I support the testing that we're doing in the schools. As Dr. Noonan has said, it's not one mitigation strategy. It's this layering of mitigation that's going to. Thank you.
Thank you. We will now move to candidate Tice.
Thank you. I'm also grateful for our local health department and the great relationship that our school system has forged with our health department. I'm grateful that they're able to lead the way with contact tracing and giving us guidance. I don't, none of our school leadership and our teachers are trained in pandemic response. At least they weren't until the last year and a half. We're all learning on the fly. So I'm grateful for the experts and the science. I also think that private and public schools are governed differently, and they serve different populations. So I tend to rely and look at what other public institutions are doing. I definitely support the current mitigation strategies and the the current policies in place. If the vaccines once they're not under emergency use and they're fully approved for younger children, I would support a vaccine mandate and masks as well. Thank you.
Thank you. We will now turn to candidate Anderson.
Hi. I'm very thankful to our school staff, Superintendent Noonan and the board for kind of coming out of last year and going into this year full steam ahead. I think we've done a great job this year of learning what works and implementing those. I think that the mask wearing at all levels ensures that there is educational continuity, in particular for due to quarantine rules. I support those as going forward. I do also support the surveillance testing and the diagnostic testing that will be rolled out. I would actually like to see the diagnostic testing be offered to more than just those people who sign up for surveillance testing. I think it should be open to all, even if they're uncomfortable with surveillance testing. And as hopefully the vaccine becomes approved and given emergency use authorization, I hope that the schools are able to hold on-site clinics like they were with the high schoolers and encourage everyone to get a vaccine as early as possible.
Thank you. We will now turn to candidate Gould.
Thanks. Let's be honest. COVID was one of the most difficult chapters that I think many of us faced. And I, as a family, we had a very difficult time, and we kept saying to ourselves, it could be worse. And it could have been, but it was still incredibly stressful. My company, we worked with 20 plus states, countless districts. I can say from firsthand experience, no district won against COVID. We were all trying to minimize the number of losses every single day when we don't know what's going on. However, I would applaud what Falls Church City has done and is doing. The number of decisions that they had to make on a weekly basis, and all the way up to even yesterday when they're rolling out the screening programs with Ms. Sharp and Dr. Noonan. There's a constant effort to try to figure out how do we coexist with COVID, but most importantly, how do we figure out the loss, emotional, academic, and social. It just didn't happen in the last 18 months. It's still happening today. So I applaud what we're trying to do, and we're going to keep focusing on this.
Thank you. We will now move to candidate Mooney.
So this is actually very much in my wheelhouse, and it's something that I've been dealing with COVID professionally since day one, rolling out testing protocols and mitigation measures for a lot of the DC medical facilities and hospitals. I actually think that this is a question that is deserving of much longer than a minute, because I think that there's actually quite a bit of room for discussion and nuance around this. But if I'm going to hit on the top things that we really need to be talking about, one, we've done an excellent job with vaccinations, and I think that that's something that we need to applaud and embrace. I think that we absolutely need to talk about off-ramps and overall goals for our schools because of our amazing vaccination rates. I think we need to be seriously discussing a test to stay program. Testing to stay helps. These are programs that have actually been rolled out worldwide and in other states. They're currently being rolled out in Maryland, and they help minimize quarantines, unnecessary quarantines and interruptions to our students day to day. And it allows students to stay in the classroom who are otherwise healthy. And I think that this is one of the singular biggest things that we should be discussing for our kids to minimize disruption for families.
Thank you very much. I am now going to hand things back to VPIS for the next question.
Thank you. And we're starting with candidate Shapiro this round. The question is, what should the city schools' educational programs and policies would you change, eliminate, or strengthen? Which policies or programs would you change, eliminate, or strengthen? 1 minute, please. Candidate Shapiro.
That's perhaps the most important question that we've gotten, because after all, that's what we're here for. And we're lucky to be in a place that doesn't require radical reform. We want to maintain and improve the educational opportunities that everyone gets. What I'm hearing a lot when I'm going around talking to voters is that Falls Church is doing a really good job with the top end, the gifted, the IB diploma kids, and a really good job with special needs, lots of extra help there. But sometimes the kids in the middle get kind of lost in the shuffle. So I want to make sure that we're not doing that. I'm also hearing that STEM education might be improved somewhat, that we're doing a good job with well-rounded literacy and other kinds of critical thinking skills, but maybe for engineering programs in college and things like that, I'd want to look at that. And I think part and parcel of that is the new math curriculum. And then fundamentally, I want to make sure that the budget is sound going forward. We just built a new school. That's all great, but we're now awash in cash. Thankfully, it's a good problem to have.
Thank you. Candidate Silverman.
So I think there are really two things that I want to do that right off the bat for when I'm sworn in January. The first is giving the teachers and the staff an authentic voice in this school system, and that means giving them the collective bargaining rights, giving them the option actually to vote whether or not they want collective bargaining rights. It's really not my decision to make for them. And that will give them a true authentic voice when talking to their administration. But the parents and the community also need an authentic voice. And I think having true town halls is something that the city could really benefit from. I really enjoy a lot of the presentations that we've been receiving lately and learning a lot from them, but there's never really an opportunity to give some back and forth meaningful dialogue. Again, running on communication, collaboration, community, these town halls are imperative in order for us to have true growth and having everybody's input and everybody's ideas in order to make the school system the best possible system we can have. Thank you.
Thank you. Candidate Tice.
Let's see, there's probably nothing that I wouldn't want to change or eliminate completely, but in terms of strengthening things, the implementation of our standards-based grading initiative continues to challenge many students at the middle and high school levels, and students and parents, and probably teachers as well. I deeply respect the International Baccalaureate Organization and the curriculum. I love the framework, and I really trust the decision makers who brought the SBG to our schools, and that our teachers are trying their hardest to implement it. But there still remains a lot of deep skepticism or confusion across the community that I think needs to be addressed. And so I think the schools have made valiant efforts in trying to explain the change, but I think there's still significant work that needs to be done. One other policy that I would really love to see strengthened is continuing to welcome and support our teachers and their families here. And I love that we're able to offer reduced tuition to some of them, to some of their kids, some of the teachers' kids, but I would like to expand that program in the future.
Thank you. Candidate Anderson.
So I would like to see kind of more systematic ways of the community giving feedback. So annual surveys for teachers, staff, and students, and parents. I think that would give a broad-based understanding of a complete view of the schools in Falls Church, and to allow better policymaking. One education thing that I would like to test out is to strengthen the ESOL program by providing high frequency language tutoring. I think the budget going into, or the school operating fund going into this year is $3 million, and that's at least $1 million over what it normally is. And I think there's a opportunity here to creatively think about how to approach education in our little city in a very creative way. And I think that's an opportunity that we should take, and that the current board should take as well. Thank you.
Candidate Gould.
I appreciate it. And given all of my roles in education, teacher, I've got lots to the list that I would love to add, but I'm not trying to be a teacher. I'm trying to be a school board member. And so I've got to understand that role and the areas of change that I can affect as a school board member. And I have already mentioned COVID. That is something that I think as a school board and the superintendent, we would work together on that. But the other two pieces that I would like to add, one is strengthening the communication and the relationship of the school board with the community. That's an important role that we have to continue to focus on in terms of how do we make sure the school board is representatives of the people that vote us in, and also strengthen that relationship of the school board with the superintendent, who is the employee of the school board. And I look forward to working with Dr. Noonan, and who is recently moved to the city and believes in the product. The other part that I would like to work on is the collective bargaining. And I've studied many collective bargaining agreements over the years. I look forward to working with teachers. I was a teacher, and I can bring that experience and work with our teacher partners to get the best collective bargaining agreement, not just for our teachers and staff, to get the best teachers here, but also the students.
Thank you. Candidate Mooney.
I will echo several of the other candidates in that I would like to be looking for opportunities to provide more proactive communication with our community. Parents don't have bandwidth. We're very busy. I was one of them. I've made the bandwidth for this. And so I do understand how it can sometimes be very difficult to understand the information that's coming around. And I think we need to do a better job as a school board to do that. I'd also like to, in reading through all of our policies, I also think that we need more language and specific and measurable goals around the policies that we've enacted. And that just beyond just standardized testing, because standardized testing can certainly give you one aspect of a child's understanding of the curriculum, but it is not the end all be all. And I think that we have opportunities to look at better data and better information beyond standardized testing. And so I would start with those two. And then it's not really a policy, but I would like us to take a closer look at the calendar for going into next year. I've heard a lot of talk and feedback around that. And so I think we should spend some time with that.
Great. And our seventh candidate on this is candidate Ortiz.
Thank you for the question. As I mentioned in my opening remarks, I have goals with respect to promoting mental and emotional health, as well as to following through on all of our commitments to diversity and inclusion. But let me mention two other areas that I think are important for the school board to strengthen. One is decision transparency. Now, there are many ways for the community to provide input to the school board, but one thing that I see from the community members that talk to me is that they feel that their input isn't recognized. So it's really important that we find a way, and there should be plenty of models for this, to make sure that that input is recognized in the decisions, whether or not they're actually in line. The next is teacher engagement. We should have a employee survey that we use to help to evaluate the superintendent, and then the school board should engage directly with teachers, because they're the ones on the ground that are doing the work. They're implementing our policies, and they're where we're going to get the best ideas.
Thank you very much. On to question number 6.
Thanks, Keith. With all the testing, I can't quit my video to stay on. Okay, wait, there we go. All right, thank you, Keith. So we are at question 6, and we're starting with candidate Silverman for this one. Here's the question. Will you please state your sources of campaign funding? Are there any contributions over $500? Are there any contributions from sources outside Falls Church City? And it's 1-minute question.
Yes, I have contributions over $500, and I have contributions from outside of Falls Church City. I'm actually very proud of the fact that I've received contributions from about 100 individuals, many of whom live in Falls Church City. I'm flattered that many progressive individuals believe in me, my message, and my campaign, and made a contribution. I'm proud of the fact that I've received contributions from labor union PACs, which are committees funded by hardworking middle-class men and women. None of the funds I receive represent any sort of conflict of interest, and I wouldn't have accepted them had I seen a conflict. But campaigns cost money, and this money allowed me to use the funds to use union printing for all of my campaign material, and allowed me to communicate my message to the voters of Falls Church City. For this, I'm extremely humbled and grateful. With these funds, I was excited to sponsor the Falls Church Education Foundation. I was one of the, I think I was the only school board member or candidate, school board candidates to make a sizable contribution to this year's Tinner Hill Festival. Thank you to everyone who's, and it truly means a lot to me, and I'm very humbled. Thank you.
Thank you. We will now move to candidate Tice.
Thank you. To date, I have raised about $3,500 from 50 individual donors, and I decided to cap my donations at $100 to make sure my campaign was funded from as wide a group of support as possible. So my donations average about $70 per donor, all of which are from Falls Church residents, except my parents and my sister. So, but they still stayed at the cap. That yes, campaigns in our little city cost some money, but I believe it's extremely important that our campaigns for local office remain accessible to as many candidates as possible. I don't think that in a city our size, it's necessary to raise tens of thousands of dollars or collect significant amounts of money from groups or individuals outside our city. One of the huge benefits of our small size is that with a commitment to grassroots campaigning or just regular sustained involvement and service around town, you can get to know a pretty sizable amount of people in town. And no amount of money replaces engaging with community members one-on-one.
Thank you. We will now move to candidate Anderson.
So I have been super humbled at how many of my family members and friends from high school, college, graduate school, and dear friends from my church out in California that was at the front line of LGBT rights and fighting for humane immigration policies. All those people who I've known in my life and who have made significant contributions just to me in personal growth. I'm humbled by getting their contributions. I have received a couple of donations over 500 from a few of my neighbors, dear friends who have children my age, and people who have helped my wife and I find the services for our son that he needs that he gets from outside of school. Falls Church City is a very low cost campaign to get into, but they do cost money, and I'm deeply humbled by how many people have given me funds to fund that campaign.
Thank you. We will now turn to candidate Gould.
All right, I appreciate it. I do have one donor, and it was probably the most difficult donation to get out of everybody. It was to talk to my wife about this. We are self-funded. She did approve, which is great, but we are self-funding the campaign. This is a choice by Laura and myself to do this. We wanted the campaign to be independent. We wanted to avoid the appearance of any allegiance except to myself and my principles. We wanted to have conversations with anybody in the community and make sure that we were collecting feedback and everybody was equitable in how they engage with me. It's one of the themes of my campaign. It's on all my yard signs of independence. And so my service, this is part of my service of giving back to the community. And I felt like my service to give back to Falls Church City, a community that I love, doesn't start when I get elected, it starts now. And so that's why we chose to be self-funded. That does not mean that I cannot accept help from everybody. This is grassroots and its truest form. So I really appreciate everybody canvassing, hosting yard signs, helping me and Laura out with this effort.
Thank you. We will now turn to candidate Mooney.
So my answer is actually quite similar to Tate's. When I decided to run for school board, I made the conscious decision that this was going to be something that I was going to put money aside to run for in and of myself. I do believe any type of political office, even nonpartisan, which is the only type I'd ever run for, is an act of service. And so it was important to me to also put a chunk of money, and I was fortunate enough to be in the financial position to be able to put my own money behind it. I've accepted some small donations from some friends and honestly, but have largely resisted that until I needed it. And at this point, I haven't needed that additional monies as yet, because I do think that it's important that local elections stay accessible and reasonable. And so I am also largely self-funded.
Thank you. We will now move to candidate Ortiz.
Hi, I've received no donations above $500. My campaign total is about $1,500, and it might inch up a little bit. About half of that came from personal donations and a little bit from out of state, from my wife's best friend, my best friend in Michigan, as well as my aunt. And if she's watching, I promise to send a thank you card. I really believe that we're school board members. We're here to serve our local community. And in doing that, it doesn't take tens of thousands of dollars. I mean, we all know how much signs cost. We all know how much these little cards cost. Ads cost a lot. But really, when you can knock on every door in town, you don't need a lot of money. And that's why after I finish up, and I might host a little party, I'm going to donate all excess funds to the Falls Church Education Foundation so that they can use those funds effectively.
Thank you. We will now turn to candidate Shapiro.
Thanks. When I started this run, I figured it's going to be a competitive race. It's an unusual year. It's going to take about $10,000 to run an effective campaign here. That was my goal. And I've been blown away. As of last night, I think I'm pushing 30,000 from 151 different donors. Almost all of that is unsolicited. Most of what I did is just post my campaign website on my Facebook page and my Twitter feed, and that's about it. And I have friends all across the country, thankfully. Some of them have done very well. So I have 6 donors who are over $500. One of them is a big law firm partner in New York, and I've known him since he was 18. I won't tell any of those stories, sorry. Another one, I remember rooming with him at a buddy's bachelor party in Miami, and on my wall here is a hammerhead shark that I caught. He's called Cato, and some people, my kids like him, and we're keeping him. About 40%, 45% of my donors are local. If you include DC and Maryland, I think we're up to 55%. About a third of my funds total is local. And no government contractors. My biggest corporate donation, I think, is $5. So I'm happy. I'm blown away, humbled.
Thank you very much. We've reached the point in the program where we are now going to be taking questions from the public. And so I'm going to turn it to Sabina from the League of Women Voters to handle those questions coming in from the public. Sabina.
Thanks, Annie. So we have a lot of questions. I'm going to do my best to try to group them together so we can be efficient. If for any of them you can take less than a minute, great. Just I want to try to get to as many as I can. And if I don't, I apologize. So the first question is, what do you see as the strengths of our school system? And what do you see as the weaknesses or what's missing? And how would you address those? In a similar vein, what decisions of the current school board have you disagreed with?
Starting with candidate Tice.
That's tough in under a minute. Okay. The strengths of our community are, one, our teachers. I think our teachers are amazing. I say that as a mom of a teacher. I was a teacher. My friends are teachers. I know what good teaching looks like, and I see it time and time again. I've got 4 different learners in this house who've had so many different teachers over the last 9 years, and they are truly excellent. So I think that's one of our biggest strengths, and why one of the biggest pillars of my campaign is to just support our teachers and listen to them and amplify them and keep them around and pay them well. A weakness of our community is a lack of diversity. I mean, I really and would love to see the community embrace efforts to increase our diversity of all kinds across the city. I want my kids exposed to all different kinds of kids from all different walks of life. And I do worry that the housing is getting so expensive, and not that the school board can directly impact the housing costs in town, but in terms of just a weakness of our community, that is something that I would still like to brainstorm how to improve.
Candidate Anderson.
So I would definitely agree with Ms. Tice that one of the biggest strengths of our system is our teachers. They are extremely talented. I think one of them mentioned to me that the best thing that Falls Church has been able to do is just to attract extremely smart teachers and be able to keep them. And they just happen to, they want to be here because I think, the community values schools. We have very engaged families, and I think that's great. And so, I think one of the things that could be improved is making sure that they are given a voice in decisions, being able to speak about, kind of the mental health stress that they're facing, especially after the last year, and the burnout that they're experiencing. I think one of the biggest things going into next year is going to be figuring out how to address that in order to keep the good teachers that we have.
Candidate Gould. You're on mute. Tate, if you release your mute.
Hi, there we go. That's a lot easier. So yeah, so I think I'm going to repeat a little bit of the what Kathleen and Jared mentioned about the really what's the strength of our schools. The heartbeat of our schools is our teachers, our staff, our coaches. I mean, this is why a lot of us move to the schools, why we try to get our friends to move to Falls Church City. And that's our experience from day one when my son entered kindergarten and had Mr. Sikora and Ms. Shazadi and how they engaged with him just from the first day. You could just tell the magic of the connections that these teachers have with the students, how much they enjoy. And I was a high school math teacher. I was national board certified. I was Radio Shack National Teacher of the Year. No one remembers what that is anymore. And I would be nervous to teach with most of these folks. These are really high caliber folks. And I think we should always make sure that we support and we acknowledge and we realize how special they are. In terms of improving, I think I've talked about a few of these, but really I'm really looking forward to helping improve the school board and the governance and its connection to the community. I'm really excited about that chapter, working with Sue and with Laura and Phil. So.
Candidate Mooney.
Yes, our teachers are great. I'm not going to belabor that. I think everyone's hit that. I totally agree with everyone's statement. I actually would also add, I think our parents are part of what makes this great. Parents are involved and they care and they pay attention. And I think that across the board, and I think that is a truly magical thing to have in this community as a community of parents that really are willing to go above and beyond to support their children and support their school system. So I would say that is one of our biggest strengths. The thing that I think that we really as a school system need to start embracing is leadership that's not afraid to open themselves up to constructive criticism. And perhaps this is just my background as an athlete, but I am someone that loves to hear constructive criticism. I want to hear how I can do things better. I want to celebrate my victories, but I want to know how I can be better. And I want to invite that type of conversation to the table actively. And I think that that's something that will really change the tone and the sense of shared responsibility and transparency with both our teachers and our parents.
Candidate Ortiz.
Thanks for the question. I think one of the major strengths that we have here in Falls Church is the fact that the community is so committed to the schools. The schools are part of the town's identity. All of us have knocked on doors and we've talked to people who either don't have children or had children who left the schools and who are happy to engage with us and happy to be up to date on the schools. And that support is critical to the long-term success of our school district. Regarding areas, I'm not going to necessarily call it a weakness, but an area where we can have significant improvement is in the engagement of teachers in terms of using them for the resource that they are and giving them the opportunities to grow and to be leaders as teachers and not have to go to the central office to get a bigger salary. If we really embrace our teachers, we'll be in a position to advance all of the initiatives that we've been discussing this evening.
Thank you. On to candidate Shapiro.
Well, the teachers are obviously great. The parents are great. We all moved here for the excellent schools. We have a happy problem here and how to maintain them and make them even better. We're, congratulate everyone for our status within the state and nationally. The other thing is the sense of community. I mean, I love this kind of small town surrounded by suburbia next to the big city, the best of all worlds. We're also kind of like, Wobegon, right? Everyone's above average in a certain sense, which introduces some mental health challenges in the schools, to be sure, to be worked on. But the last year has also revealed some challenges, some structural and leadership weaknesses. And so things to be improved are communication, so parents feel like they're heard, so teachers feel like they're heard and aren't necessarily funneled through administrators' offices, and accountability. Because not just Wobegon, we sort of become Stars Hollow from Gilmore Girls, and you have this divided town in certain ways. I want to make sure to bring back that responsiveness, transparency, bring back a school board that we can all be proud of.
Thank you. And last, candidate Silverman.
Sorry to sound like a broken record, but it's the teachers that are our biggest strength in this city. And the most important thing we can be doing right now is supporting our teachers and ensuring that they have the support that they need in order to give our kids the extra academic, social, emotional support that they need. Because if our teachers don't have that if they don't have the support that they need from the administration and the funds aren't put into the extra academic, social, emotional supports, then they're going to have a hard time really teaching our kids through this really trying past year and a half, where there may have been some COVID slide. Maintaining the small class sizes is also a critical factor in maintaining and keeping our teachers here and keeping them part of our school system. And again, giving them an authentic voice. I keep saying that over and over. Voice. And that can be done through collective bargaining and giving them the opportunity to work with the administration to bargain for the things that they good in our school system.
Okay, I think the next question we got has to do with what data you think should be used to evaluate the performance of the superintendent in general, and how would you assess the performance of our current superintendent, and did you agree with the school board's decision to extend his contract for another 4 years?
With that, we'll start with candidate Anderson.
So I think that the superintendent has done a great job in operations. I think he did a great job with getting the vaccines to teachers, the vaccines to students, and working with other organizations in order to make that happen. And so I think I agree with, extending his contract. He got the school built, on time and I think around budget. So I think he's done a very good job on many different aspects. I think that it's important to have data from staff, so an independent voice from the staff, because that's who he manages. And so in order to kind of evaluate him, we need honest opinions from the staff. And depending on what kind of priorities we set in the strategic planning and what measurable goals are decided on upon there, then that should also be used to evaluate the superintendent.
Thank you. Candidate Gould.
Yeah, I appreciate the question. I think I echo Jared. I mean, Dr. Noonan had an incredibly hard job. What he did, he was going through what all superintendents in this country were trying to go through, and to navigate that, as well as have kids in the school district and be a parent and go through that stress. I think very few of us can imagine what he was trying to do on a day-to-day basis. So in terms of evaluating how he did, there's many different formal and informal systems that you can use for evaluating a superintendent. And those can be, low cost. Those can be the current annual evaluation process that we use. There are 360 evaluations. And so I would definitely employ more of an ongoing evaluation, not just an annual evaluation. He is the employee of the school board, and he is an empathetic leader. He's a visionary, but he also wants to be coached, and he wants feedback, and he wants thought advisors. And that's the role as a school board, is he is our employee. And I have state superintendents that work for me now for my company. I feel very comfortable managing and that relationship. So I look forward to working with him and having him as an employee.
Thank you. Candidate Mooney.
Yeah, I'm going to probably sound very similar in that I think Dr. Noonan had a very heavy lift this past year. And I do applaud him for doing his absolute best in the face of numerous obstacles, managing building a building on time, and that project just in and of itself is very challenging. And I think that was done incredibly well. But I do think that it is the school board's responsibility to provide leadership and guidance to the superintendent. I think that that's one of our most critical things. I think part of that is encouraging feedback from staff. I think part of that is having open lines of communication and encouraging communication with parents. I think that part, again, providing some leadership guidance and some training for our superintendent, helping support their growth is incredibly important. And that's something I'm very committed to from being on the school board, is providing that guidance and that coaching from a leadership perspective, from a communications perspective, to really support him to be the best leader that he can possibly be.
Thank you. Candidate Ortiz.
In my day job, I lead an organization of over 90 people, and my direct reports are executives and I have to evaluate them every year, and I have to evaluate them periodically throughout the year. And we use a 5 element scale. And without getting into all the details, it covers everything from leading your people to making sure you get the job done. And Dr. Noonan is a tremendous administrator, and the school board is absolutely right to renew his contract. But in terms of leading people and building coalitions, from my discussions with both the community as well as with a couple of dozen teachers and staff, Dr. Noonan can improve. And after talking to Dr. Noonan, he is the kind of person that can do this. The challenge, or rather not the challenge, the way you measure this is really quite straightforward. Employee engagement surveys are a best practice, as well as 360 reviews. Those should be part of the process to evaluate the superintendent across the range of dimensions that we expect an executive to perform at.
Thank you. We're on to candidate Shapiro.
Dr. Noonan gets high grades on management and operations. And as several people have said, I think he needs improvement on communications. I think we all do. I think the board certainly does. That's why I'm running. I think the board needs to give him more guidance. After all, he works for them. He works for the community. And the breakdown in communications, even more than anything operationally, is why there was so much upset and distrust over the last year in terms of the moving goalposts over COVID metrics and a whole host of other issues. So yeah, we need a 360-degree reviews. We need climate surveys of parents, teachers, staff, everyone. That hasn't been done in a long time. Instead, we got a survey about whether to rename the schools. So we need to really drill down on what matters. And so I want to make sure that there's not too much deference to the superintendent, and instead guidance, governance, to make sure that he can use his excellent management and operation skills.
Candidate Silverman.
I really echo a lot of everybody here that we need these 360 reviews, and that authentic and timely and consistent feedback is necessary in order to make him the best superintendent that he can possibly be. I give him, as many people here did, tremendous credit for building a beautiful high school. If you haven't seen it yet, I highly encourage you to do so, on time, under budget, during a pandemic, which I think is a huge component of this. And, tremendous credit to everybody, actually everybody who put a lot of effort into making the new high school happen. And in terms of just assessing him, I think it's an ongoing practice that the school board should be doing, and it's just making him a better superintendent. It's working on communication with him, it's working on collaboration with him, and there's no major overhauls. It's just trying to kind of fine tune some things and make him the best superintendent he can be.
Thank you. And candidate Tice.
When I served as PTA president, I had the opportunity to work closely with our leadership all year long. And I learned to just deeply respect the tremendous work that our leadership does on a daily basis. And I served right in the peak of the trauma. I don't know if there were a lot of peaks of trauma during the pandemic, but the summer of 2020 was a challenge for all of us. And I served on the Superintendent's Advisory Committee that summer as we were trying to form and advise plans for the upcoming school year. And I got to see firsthand just how hard the superintendent and all of the people at central office were working day in and day out, as the data was constantly changing, as the priorities were constantly changing, as we were learning on the fly and kind of trying to land the plane while it was on fire. And I really value that experience because it really showed me how hard they're working. And I do think that he deserved for his contract to be renewed, and I support that. And there's always room for improvement.
Thank you. We're on to question 3 from the public.
Thank you. Currently, there's no paid parental leave for Falls Church City Public School staff and teachers. As a school board member, would you support or advocate for such paid parental leave?
And we're with candidate Gould.
Yes, is the short answer. I mean, there's, paid parental leave is an important aspect of that transition to make sure that as not just as a community or as an employer that we support, but it's really for the health of the parents and the health of that very difficult transition and a great transition. So I would support that. My own company, we support leave. We have an unlimited paid vacation leave policy for all of our staff. We've had that since day one, since I founded the company. The concept of leave is important. The concept of recharging is critically important. To do that, obviously, you've got to have the fiscal understanding of how to manage that and how to predict that and how to budget for that. It is not just about saying, let's give this leave without understanding the ramifications. So coupled with that fiscal oversight of implementing leave, which I have done for multiple companies, I would look forward to working with the analysis, the fiscal analysis, to make sure that we're not just putting a great tagline that we can afford it, and we are recruiting, using that as a recruitment tool to get the best teachers into Falls Church.
Candidate Mooney.
So I echo Tate in this, and that I would say absolutely I support paid leave for our teachers and staff. I do think that there's a huge important fiscal aspect that comes with that we need to understand so that we can make sure we're budgeting accordingly and understanding what that looks like for our annual budget. But I do understand also the school is an employer, and we've all talked about the fact that our teachers are great, but part of attracting great talent is ensuring that our pay and our benefits are attracting great talent. And so I am 100% behind looking at anything that's going to attract great talent and maintain great talent within our schools.
Thank you. Candidate Ortiz.
Yes, I support paid family and parental leave for FCCPS teachers and staff. Obviously, this has a budget implication, and one that we wouldn't want to impact the educational opportunities for our children. So in implementing that, I'd work with my school board members as well as closely with the city council to make sure there's an understanding of that impact, and then also engage directly with the community, because I'm sure the broad part of our community would support providing those benefits to our teachers as well. And if we're honest with them about what it costs to get the best teachers and to make sure that they have lives that are worth living, we have to engage the community, the city council, and the school board members to make sure that we are doing the best we can do for our teachers.
Thank you. Candidate Shapiro.
You know, I really wish I could call a friend on this one. My wife studied this issue as a national reform proposal, although maybe not, because at the local level and specifically acting as an employer, because after all, we're not setting policy for all of Falls Church. This is just the Falls Church City School Board. Those are different kinds of issues. I haven't studied this as a matter of budgeting. I think it's, it's easy to say, yes, it's a great idea, but providing housing allowances to allow teachers to live closer is a great idea. There's lots of things that might be, and I just want to understand what our competition offers, a mix of higher compensation, smaller class sizes, better facilities, a more rewarding professional environment all around. This definitely paid leave needs to be thrown into the mix in terms of how we use the budget that we have. And I do want to be competitive with everyone and make sure that we're fair and equitable to our great teachers.
Thank you. On to candidate Silverman.
Absolutely, we should be offering paid family leave, paid parental leave. Our city employees currently just increased their maternity leave from, I believe, 3 weeks to 6 weeks, and our teachers currently have 0 weeks on the maternity leave. That's an equity issue, and as a single working mom here in the city, I do look through a lens of single parents who try to juggle a lot. While I have a great co-parent and my ex-husband here in the city, this is an equity issue. Teachers often have to take 2 weeks off at a time right now if one of their children is quarantined from COVID. If they're in a different school district and they have a child quarantined, their whole family, their whole leave is spent on quarantine time. So yes, there should be paid parental leave, and that should be something that's also can possibly be bargained for in a contract when they have the opportunity to vote for collective bargaining.
Thank you. Candidate Tice.
Well, you asked us to not use the full minute if we didn't need to. So I will go ahead, since we seem to be in relative agreement here. I will say, yes, I absolutely support exploring it. Obviously, there's a financial consideration. It's not something you can wave a magic wand and make it happen overnight, but I do think it's extremely important. And I think it would go a long way to retaining our amazing teachers. I think it's just one tool in the toolbox that we could use over time to support our teachers.
Thank you for that. Candidate Anderson.
Yes, I support exploring it. I think it's an important issue. My employer provides it, so does my wife's employer, and so I think it's important to ensure that we are getting and retaining the best teachers and staff, and ensuring that we do that in the understanding that there is a fiscal impact. And so, knowing that there's a fiscal impact, you have to explore that. So it's yes, and we need to see what we can do to offer it.
Thank you. We'll entertain one more question from the public this time.
Okay, great, thanks. So currently the school system has a $900,000 budget surplus. How would you, if elected, recommend spending that? And if you get time, people have commented that we didn't get an answer about what previous school board decisions did you disagree with? So if there's anything you want to highlight in that regard, please go ahead.
We're starting with candidate Mooney.
Great, thank you. So again, I think the testing that we're rolling out is great. And I think there's part of that is the rapid diagnostic testing. Again, I am a big proponent at exploring a test to stay program to minimize disruptions in the classroom. The $900,000 surplus, we have to be careful about making sure that this isn't going to be a yearly incurred cost. So we have to be smart about how we spend that money because you spend it, it's a kind of a one-time spend. So again, I think that looking at ways to help eliminate COVID disruption is an important aspect of that. I also think that it would be prudent of us to explore certain programs that would support mental, emotional health and learning losses. Again, these are things that we can put into place for short-term gaps, but for long-term payoffs and implementations, and to see what various things we could put in place that would pay off so that we could look at those for budgeting purposes in the future. So mental, emotional health, learning loss, test to stay.
Great. Candidate Ortiz.
Hi there, thank you. With respect to that budget surplus, I would work with my colleagues to deploy it most effectively. As I said, my priorities are promoting the mental and emotional health of our students and staff. And then in addition, I believe that there's, since we have just begun a lot of our work on diversity, equity, and inclusion, it can be used for programs to help to jumpstart that as well. In addition, to the degree that there's funding available, there's tremendous opportunities to provide seed funding to teachers, similar and perhaps in partnership with the Falls Church Education Foundation, to make sure to really truly capitalize on the innovation that occurs in our classrooms every day.
Thank you. Candidate Shapiro.
Well, I don't think I have much new beyond what's already been said. Looking after learning loss, mental health, teacher compensation. We've talked about that. This goes right, dovetails with the previous question. Maybe that should be with new benefits, whether for parental leave or anything else, housing allowances or anything else. But I do want to make sure there's greater transparency regarding the federal and state COVID funds that we're getting, particularly in light of recent drops in standardized test scores. So we have to use that money for long-term investments in improving educational opportunities, whether it's the folks in the middle, whether it's underprivileged communities, that needs to be evaluated rather than short-term operational spending. And, if we have so much money and we're doing very well, then we might consider returning some to the taxpayer. I don't know. We'll see. We're a very highly taxed jurisdiction. As for a decision I didn't agree with, more the process of the renaming, spending a lot of money on a survey and then going against the supermajoritarian weight of the community after that, I think that rubbed a lot of people the wrong way.
Thank you. Candidate Silverman.
Unfortunately, we're still not out of the woods in COVID, and I think that that's where the budget surplus should be spent. First of all, just making sure that our schools remain open full time with as few disruptions as possible, but in a safe and responsible way. But at the same time, we really need to address the academic, social, and emotional loss of the past year. And that's ensuring that our students have that support, and that our teachers have that support in order to implement those programs. For example, summer school should be a robust opportunity for every family who desires to go to summer school. That means that you need to pay the teachers competitively. From my understanding, the pay was not as competitive as some other neighboring jurisdictions, and many teachers chose not to participate in the summer school program. We need to pay bus drivers competitively. Many other neighboring districts are paying more than we are. So we are having some that budget surplus should be, again, used to address those academic, social, emotional losses, and to make sure that we can provide all the services.
Thank you. Candidate Tice.
One thing that I would want to do with the surplus is ask the teachers what they need. They're the experts. They know what they're seeing in the classroom. When we talk about learning loss, I think it's really more instruction time loss. That's what we lost last year. And so how can we overcome that? How can we give them more individual time with their kids? Is it hiring more temporary staff to reduce, get into smaller groups, or is it certain programs that they need? And same with the mental health piece. I mean, I want to ask the experts and what they're seeing on the ground and what they need. In terms of something I disagree with, this summer during my time as PTA president, I also served on the calendar committee for the 2020 calendar year, not this current one that we're in, last year's calendar I was a part of. And I thought that was a really healthy exercise. And I think there's been a lot of community pushback or confusion on this year's calendar. And I think that's because they stepped away from the committee model. So I'm actually glad to see them moving back towards the committee model, getting more feedback on building the calendar.
Thank you. Candidate Anderson.
Yes, so there are many ways that I think you can spend, close to $1 million. You can either spend it on one-time spend, so maybe an extra electric bus, seeing how much a test to stay program would be. Thankfully, federal funds have allowed us to hire more support staff for that social emotional piece that I think a lot of students have been dealing with. I would honestly like to see us test. I would ask teachers to kind of see what they think, but I would like to see the schools think creatively about what program would we like to see for 1 year, just to see how it works. Like I mentioned earlier, maybe high frequency individual or small group language tutoring for ESOL students. Pick a literacy program for those students who are, somewhat behind. And kind of see if that works for 6 months. And if it does, if it works super well, then you can figure out what the trade-off is for including that in the next year's budget.
Thank you. And Candidate Gould.
Yeah, so $900,000, I mean, there's many different ways that we should be not just spending it, but saving it and investing it, and not in the traditional sense, but really understanding where that money can go. The priority, I think, like my other candidates have talked about, is really addressing the learning loss, the academic loss, the social and emotional loss. And there's lots of different ways to do that. The Institute of Education Sciences has some very low-cost, evidence-based practices for helping with that academic loss. But in terms of the social and emotional loss, we've got the counselor program that we've been investing in, but there are other areas. And I think sometimes we overlook areas such as athletics and extracurricular activities that really help with supporting students and that emotional connection and that social connection that they need. And we have significant issues with our athletic budget and some of our extracurricular budgets that we can really address with that. And I think just to echo Ilya and Kathleen, the two issues that we could have definitely improved on is not the intent of the calendar but really the process of the school renaming and the calendar. So that's those two areas.
At this time, we'll have each candidate be allowed to make a concluding statement that would include any clarifications or rebuttals that you'd like to make. You'll each have 90 seconds, and we're starting with candidate Ortiz.
Sorry, I didn't realize I was next. I really appreciate the opportunity to appear with all my fellow candidates. I want to thank the Village Preservation and Improvement Society, as well as the League of Women Voters, for hosting this. I am the candidate with multi-decades of experience in the core functions of the board. With respect to strategic planning, I worked with the state of Louisiana to develop a plan and a vision with communities for how to protect and restore its coast. I've worked in Pittsburgh. I serve on the board of Creative Cauldron because of my commitment to the arts. I've managed $40 million budgets and reported to Congress to make sure that they deliver. I make policy on a daily basis, and I have to make sure that that provides for citizens. And then I oversee executives, as I mentioned. And with this, and with these skills, I look forward to working with my colleagues on the school board. And I believe that I've earned your vote in order to do that, so that we can address the issues that have been highlighted by the pandemic, that we can engage the community effectively, and that we can work effectively with our teachers and staff to make our schools the best they can be. Thank you.
Thank you. Candidate Shapiro.
Thanks. And thanks to the parents, teachers, and staff who have made our tiny school district a leader in the state and region and overall quality. Still, last year revealed certain weaknesses in priorities, in executive leadership, and that's why I'm running. And the theme of my campaign is accountability. Accountability means responsiveness and representation. I want to represent community members and respond to your concerns. Accountability means transparency. I will explain all my votes and other official decisions online. Accountability means independence. I will not go along with groupthink or the path of least resistance, but will bring a fresh perspective. Accountability means accessibility. I will quickly respond to emails and hold regular office hours around town. I'm gratified that the chair and vice chair recently adopted that idea. Better late than never. Accountability means opportunity. I was an ESL learner and now speak Spanish in addition to Russian and other languages, so appreciate the cultural challenges many face. Accountability means ownership of major decisions. Our educational initiatives would enjoy more validity and authority if the board debated and voted on more of them. Fundamentally, I take the school board's role in governance seriously and want to make sure that the superintendent and district leadership are ultimately accountable to the community. I'd be grateful for your support. Thank you.
Thank you. Candidate Silverman.
Communication, collaboration, and community. I believe in strong leadership so we can have the best schools for our children and the community. I pride myself in being a good listener, an advocate, a reasonable and thoughtful voice, and someone who can work with people even if we have different opinions. Ensuring our schools remain open full-time with as few disruptions as possible, but in a safe and responsible way, is necessary while we continue on this uncertain journey. I will advocate to ensure our students have the academic, social, and emotional support they need, especially after COVID. The teachers need these supports funded in order for them to do their best. I promise I will always have an open door policy and be accessible to the community throughout my term. While I know I won't agree with everybody that I speak with, I promise I will consider all opinions, listen to all voices, and the final decisions will come from a committed place in my heart to do what is right for our children. I hope to earn your vote. If you have any questions or concerns, please feel free to reach out to me. You can do that at my website, Lori Silverman, 4, fcc.com. Early voting has already begun, and the last day to register to vote is this coming Tuesday. So please make sure that you're registered or to check your voter registration status. That's less than a week away. And please remember to vote for me, Lori Silverman, before or on November 2nd. Thank you.
Thank you. Candidate Tice.
Believe it or not, I'm actually a real introvert. I really, really enjoy time at home with a book and my puppy, and I love when things get rained out. But I remain deeply engaged in our community because I believe in the old adage that it really does take a village. And across Falls Church, there are so many victories to celebrate, projects to continue working on, and problems to solve. And I just feel an obligation to do my part. So as a school board member, I will continue to be an active and engaged member of our community. I will be aware of student involvement, accomplishments, and challenges. And I think being informed at a high level is of course necessary in making important policy decisions, but those decisions should be made with an understanding of and a connection to the community. So I want to lead with responsive and open communication. And there's no doubt that even with all we have going for us, it's been a hard 1.5 years for our community, especially. The pandemic was traumatic and there's a lot of healing that needs to be done, and I would like to be a part of that. Do I agree with every decision ever made by our leadership? No, and I don't ever expect to always agree. but I do have a good sense of how schools are run and how our decisions are being made. And I believe that those decisions are being made in good faith. So if those decisions could be communicated in a more open way with more public dialogue, I think more of the community would have that trust too. If elected, I would like to help improve that communication, and I hope to be a school board member who works hard for positive change, celebrating our strengths and challenging us to always be better. Thank you.
Thank you. Candidate Anderson?
Thanks for having us tonight. I really enjoyed seeing all my fellow candidates. I think one clarification, and I think everyone would agree with this, I think sometimes when we talk about the schools, we tend to talk about teachers and kind of slip into the kind of shorthand of thinking teachers are the only staff members. And so I do want to recognize that all the staff members at our schools did an excellent job and do an excellent job, the paraprofessionals, the food service, the bus drivers. And I think that's very important to recognize. And it's something that, you know, that's kind of language that I slip into, and it's something that I think we all need to be aware of. You know, I want to kind of emphasize that I have experience in collaborative problem solving across multiple fields, including public education. I am committed to working with other school board members, school administration, staff, and other community members if elected. I think it's important that the board continue to operate with respect for everyone in the community, and that anyone bringing forward any concern, whether or not someone agrees with it, is met with empathy. That way they know that they've been heard, that their voice has been heard, and it has been considered. I think through collaboration and through that empathic feedback and receiving that feedback, the board can ensure that our students continue to receive an excellent education, that the budget is effectively allocated to address our priorities, that strategic planning is performed with full information, and policies are thoroughly evaluated, and staff work in a supportive environment.
Thank you. And Candidate Gould?
Yeah, no, I appreciate the League of Women Voters and VPIS for hosting this. And I also appreciate the number of people that are tuning in and sending questions. And I know we're not getting to those questions, but I would encourage you to reach out to all of us to ask those questions that we weren't able to answer. And I do appreciate being here with the other 6 candidates. I feel like I would be excited to work with any permutation of the folks elected from this group, and obviously work with Sue and Laura with Phil starting in January. And I hope that I have that opportunity. I feel like my education experience is something that can be an asset as one of 7 members. And that's an important distinction. And I do have experience. I've been a high school teacher. I've been an education researcher, an education statistician. I've worked for the Federal Department of Ed. I've been a teacher instructor. I've worked on policy. I've worked with governors, state superintendents on their education. I mean, this is all I've ever done, and this is all I'll ever do. And I really want the opportunity to not serve all these other districts and states, but serve Falls Church City. And this community has welcomed us from day one. And I really do want the opportunity to give back. And that's a core value of our family. And I think finally, I hope that you've seen that I've got significant experience as a leader and a proven leader in various large organizations, overseeing hundreds of millions of dollars in taxpayer funds at the federal level. And I want to bring that kind of accountability and oversight to the role of school board. So I look forward to your support and look forward to hopefully hearing from you to answer the many questions that I know we're not able to get to tonight. So thank you.
And last, Candidate Mooney.
Yes, I echo everyone in saying thank you so much for providing this forum tonight. A lot of hard work goes into it. So I'm deeply appreciative to the people who took the time to tune in. I'm also deeply appreciative of the candidates. What a horrible problem to have 6 other great people running who are looking to serve our school and our community. And I really do think that it is a true reflection of the power of community and the power of our parents and the power of our schools that we have such great people who are willing to do a largely thankless job. And it's a hard one. And I think that with that comes people who need to be strong leaders and strong communicators. And that is something I do every day. I've done it every day since college. Whether it's leading a diverse team of individual people from all different types of backgrounds to reach great heights and working together. I do it every day in my job now with physicians and highly educated individuals and patients and mincing down sometimes often hard to understand information into easily digestible parts. And quite frankly, I have spent the last year doing this role in advocating and supporting and representing families in this community. I've watched every school board meeting. I have had meetings with everyone from the mayor to PTA to our own superintendent to school board members. I am deeply involved in the conversations and what has been going on in the past year. I'm ready to hit the ground running. And I want everyone to feel like they have an empathetic advocate leader in me. And so I would ask for your vote. Thank you so much for your time.
Thank you. Back to Allison.
Thank you so much, everybody. Thank you to all of our candidates for participating. Thank you to the great audience who stayed with us even when we went past our appointed time to end because we had so many great audience questions. So please go out and vote, and we really appreciate your participation tonight. That's all. We will be posting a recording as soon as it's available in the next couple of days.
Thanks, everyone.